Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Mini Books Podcast with your host Gloria and Rogan, and today we are excited to dive into Special Book with You. We picked this one because it has really important lessons to share and we can't wait to talk about them. So let's get started.
All right, so today we're really diving deep, folks. We're cracking open a promised land, Barack Obama's own take on, well, his journey to the White House.
Yeah, it's really something.
More than just a political memoir, though, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
This is about Obama, the person, the kind of leader he became, shaped by, all those experiences, all those decisions.
It's that personal touch that grabs you right from the start. Remember that story about his mom? He's just a kid, right? And he gets caught teasing a girl. And his mom, she just sits him down with this question: what kind of person do you want to be?
Powerful, isn't it?
It really makes you think.
It speaks volumes about his upbringing. His mother, Ann Dunham, she instilled in him this incredible sense of empathy, this sense of responsibility.
It wasn't just talk either, was it?
No, not at all. She walked the walk, challenged the way things were, always pushing him to see things from different angles. And you can really see that influencing his leadership later on.
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about his focus on the ethical side of those big decisions, like that whole auto industry bailout, he wasn't just thinking about the bottom line.
It was about the people.
Right.
The impact on their lives.
Exactly. And, it's fascinating how he talks about both his parents shaping him, his mother, adventurous, not afraid of risks, and his father.
More on the cautious side, right?
Yeah.
Practical.
Yeah, like a preview of those challenges he'd face as president, balancing those bold ideas with the need to be realistic.
Absolutely. It's that constant push and pull.
And speaking of balance, you can't ignore his time as a community organizer. I mean, talk about a crash course in bringing people together. He really learned to listen, to find common ground, and then, get people moving towards a shared goal.
Skills that became crucial later on, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely, especially during those intense healthcare reform battles.
Which reminds me of that story about Michelle observing him at that workshop. Remember? The one with the single mothers.
Oh, yeah.
She saw something in him, even back then. That ability to connect with people, no matter their background.
It's like that ability became his superpower. He wasn't just delivering speeches, he was forming real connections, understanding people's struggles.
And inspiring them, too.
Yeah.
Right? Giving them that hope for a better future.
Absolutely. And you can see that same energy when he's wrestling with whether or not to run for the Senate. He compares it to, get this, a running back spotting a hole in the line.
Strategic, right.
Calculated.
Exactly. It shows that he wasn't afraid to take a chance, but he was always strategic about it.
Always thinking a few steps ahead. And then, of course, there's that speech, the 2004 Democratic National Convention.
The one he only watched once.
The one he only watched once.
Yeah.
But it catapulted him onto the national stage. That message of hope, of unity, it resonated far beyond Chicago.
Yeah, it was a turning point, for sure. For him, maybe even for American politics. It set the stage for everything that came after.
Oh, without a doubt. And speaking of what came after, let's talk about that situation he walked into. 2008, financial crisis.
The weight of the world on his shoulders. And get this, he actually talks about a friend, just calls him George, warning him about the housing bubble months before it hit the news. Imagine that.
Knowing what's coming, but not being able to do anything about it.
The pressure must have been immense. Taking office with a collapsing economy, 2 wars on his plate, a nation completely divided, looking for leadership.
Talk about a baptism by fire. He had to project this image of calm, of control, while behind the scenes...
Chaos.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's where his leadership was truly tested, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And he talks about that decision to support TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program. Hugely unpopular at the time.
A gamble, for sure.
A huge gamble. But he knew deep down the country was on the edge of a cliff.
He had to do something. And he even says it right. Something like, if I wanted to be president, I needed to act like one.
There it is. That core belief. Putting the needs of the country first. Even when it meant making really tough and sometimes really unpopular choices. And it wasn't always smooth sailing, even within his own team. Obama shares this really revealing story about a clash, actually, between some of his female staffers and, well, the senior men on his team.
Oh, wow. What happened?
The women felt like their voices weren't being heard,
Yeah.
Constantly talked over in meetings, that kind of thing.
That's tough. It really gives you a glimpse into those power dynamics, even in an administration that, really championed diversity and inclusion.
Right. And to his credit, Obama really seemed to take it to heart.
Yeah, you get the sense that he really wanted everyone at the table to feel heard, to feel valued.
Absolutely. He even talks about having to, like, consciously remind himself to create that space, make sure those different perspectives were actually shaping the conversation.
That's huge. It speaks to the fact that leadership is an ongoing process. You're always learning, always growing.
And that humility to
Yeah.
admit you have blind spots, that's huge.
Absolutely. And those diverse viewpoints, man, they became even more crucial when you think about the whole healthcare reform battle.
Oh, man. Talk about a battle. He doesn't sugarcoat it at all.
Mm.
The endless negotiations, the pressure from every direction, it was a whirlwind.
And on top of that, you had the whole financial crisis still looming, right? People were angry.
They were distrustful. They felt like the system was rigged against them. Remember that clip of Rick Santelli on CNBC?
Ranting about bailing out the losers.
Exactly. It was raw. It was emotional.
It was the sentiment of the time. And Obama couldn't ignore that, could he?
No, but he also couldn't just cave to the pressure and abandon what he believed in. It was about finding that balance.
Sorry to interrupt you guys. If you're enjoying this podcast, then don't forget to check out our official YouTube channel, Mini Books Podcast, and subscribe for more great podcasts like this one.
And it's interesting how his approach to Wall Street differed from the way he handled the auto industry.
Yeah, totally different playbooks.
With Wall Street, it was almost like he felt this immense pressure to prevent a complete meltdown, even if it meant bailing out those institutions that a lot of people blamed for the crisis in the first place.
It was about stopping the bleeding. He even says something like, "We're the only ones between you and the pitchforks," when talking to those Wall Street executives.
Wow.
The pressure was that real.
But then with the auto industry, it's like he took a stand. More willing to risk political capital.
He saw it as fighting for American jobs, American livelihoods. And that just speaks to his roots, right? That belief in the power of government to uplift communities.
To make a real difference in people's lives.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating study of leadership, that's for sure.
No doubt. And speaking of tough choices, let's shift gears a bit to foreign policy. It's striking how open he is about that tension, the one between his campaign promise to end the Iraq War and then his decision to actually escalate in Afghanistan.
The reality of governing versus the promises of the campaign trail, right?
Exactly. And you can really feel the weight of those decisions on him, especially when he talks about the human cost of war, meeting those wounded soldiers, those late-night calls to families who'd lost loved ones.
It clearly stayed with him.
You can tell it shaped his worldview, that deep skepticism of military intervention.
He always pushed for diplomacy, even with adversaries like Iran.
The Iran nuclear deal, that was huge.
Historic.
Yeah.
And he got it done despite facing, let's just say, some serious opposition.
It really shows his commitment to dialogue, to finding common ground, even when it seemed impossible.
He believed in it.
But he wasn't naive about it either. He still had to deal with some pretty tough characters on the world stage.
Putin, Erdogan, they didn't make it easy.
It was a constant balancing act, wasn't it? Trying to engage, but also push back when necessary.
Protecting U.S. interests while at the same time trying to find some kind of common ground on these global issues.
It takes a certain kind of finesse, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. A blend of pragmatism and principle.
He was learning as he went, too, becoming more strategic, more willing to compromise in some areas, but never losing sight of those core values. And that awareness really comes through in how he reflects on power. It's not something he shies away from, not at all. He gets it, how seductive it can be.
How easy it is to abuse, right?
Exactly. He talks about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who will challenge you, people who aren't afraid to disagree.
Having that inner circle that's going to hold you accountable.
Yeah, and he tells a story about a moment with David Axelrod, his advisor.
Oh, right, during the campaign.
They get into this heated argument over a campaign ad, of all things, and Obama loses his cool, actually yells.
Wow.
And later, he actually apologizes to Axelrod, admits he overreacted.
That's big. You don't see that very often.
It shows a real self-awareness, right? That willingness to admit you're wrong, even when you're the one in charge.
Leadership isn't about being perfect, is it?
Definitely not. It's about learning from those mistakes and coming out stronger on the other side.
And boy, did he face a learning curve in those early years. He talks about the rise of the Tea Party, the gridlock in Congress, those relentless attacks from, well,
It was a different time politically.
to say the least. The polarization, the level of just, anger and distrust, it was something else.
And you can feel that frustration in his writing.
Absolutely. That sense of constantly battling just to get the simplest things done.
And yet, he still achieved some major victories. The Affordable Care Act, Wall Street reform, investing in clean energy.
It's pretty remarkable when you step back and think about it.
It really is. He was trying to create real change, systemic change, during this incredibly divisive time.
And at a time when government action was basically being demonized.
It took a toll, though, didn't it? I mean, on a personal level.
Oh, absolutely. He
Mhm.
talks about the impact on his family, those long hours, the constant scrutiny.
Never being able to truly escape it.
It's a good reminder that behind all of that, the presidency, the policies, there's a human being.
Trying to navigate it all, just like the rest of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it makes that moment he describes towards the end of the book all the more powerful. The trip to Oslo to accept the Nobel Peace Prize.
The candlelight vigil.
Yeah, he and Michelle are standing at the window of their hotel room looking out at all those people.
Yeah.
Thousands of them.
It's an incredible image.
Isn't it? And it triggers something in him, this overwhelming sense of, well, the weight of it all.
The weight of expectations.
Right. And the understanding that no one person, no matter how powerful, can fix everything.
He calls it the illusion of leadership, right?
Yeah. That idea that one person can single-handedly bring order to the chaos.
It's a humbling realization, isn't it?
It really is. It's about recognizing the limitations of power, the complexity of the world, and approaching it all with a sense of humility.
As we wrap up our deep dive into A Promised Land, that's what really stays with me, that message of humility, of empathy.
It's not just a political memoir. It's a story about leadership, about humanity, about the importance of striving for something better, even when it feels impossible.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that even in the face of those immense challenges, that pursuit, that fight for a better world, it's a fight worth having.
And that's a message we could all use a little more of these days.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to dive into more book insights and key learnings, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Mini Books Podcast, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We're back every Sunday at 9 a.m. with new books and more to learn from. Until next time, take care, keep learning, and keep growing. Remember, this is Mini Books Podcast.